I'm delighted to be welcomed today to give the closing keynote on the Family Office Forum, which is an outstanding array of speakers speaking on the very important topic of this family office investment landscape. My closing keynote will focus on women in family offices and how we have been leading the great wealth transfer over the last sort of 10 years or so, and how this is set to change and gain momentum in the coming decade. So as we are witnessing in real time, over the coming decade or so, there'll be trillions more in family wealth transfer from the original patriarchs to women who will be at the helm of family offices globally. I have been focusing the last 15 years or so in working with family offices in the Gulf region. And this has shown me to be incredibly a catalyst in terms of the change of leadership and governance in family office makeups. Also in Europe and the UK, where I base myself nowadays. So I find that the passing of generational wealth over the next decade is going to have a huge effect in terms of succession planning, governance, risk appetites, and the way in which we manage investments and deployment of capital and asset allocation across the family office domain. I have found in my experience as Chief of Staff, notably and COO of leading family offices in the Gulf region, most notably Saudi royal families and in the UAE, that many women are now looking at different expectations, roles and responsibilities, impact investments and purposes in terms of how they manage the family office. Women are becoming increasingly visible in the family office structure and leadership. And I see that recent data suggests that more than 15% now of women serve as principals in family offices around the world. This is less in terms of what is happening in the Gulf region, where there's probably around 5 or 6% that lead family offices. However, this is changing rapidly. If we look at for example, at the Vision 2030 that the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has enacted over the last few years, this has given women more rights, roles, and legal structures in managing family wealth and family assets in terms of Islamic Sharia principles, as well as in terms of navigating wealth in general. So I think that there's been a big shift in terms of the higher shares in markets like Europe and UK, where women are leading the landscape. However, a big issue I find as working with family offices is that women remain underrepresented in senior roles, in particular the C-suites such as CEOs, CIOs, CFOs, and chiefs of staff like myself. And we currently account for only a fifth or even a quarter of office professionals worldwide. This means that there's quite a small but a fast-growing cohort that is setting new norms, how in the way that family office capital is deployed. And this leadership, I feel, is intrinsically linked to the priorities of how wealth is transferred and how we align portfolios and also mesh them, I think, with family values, integrating new verticals such as ESG, which is gaining traction. We look at impact investing, which is becoming more and more a core theme in family offices run by women. And also looking at building resilient governance, which we have seen some issues in the past where governance hasn't been front and center, and this has caused a whole raft of issues in terms of legalities. So this is really front and center at the moment, and this is going to sort of hold momentum across different generations. I think thematically, there's a big realignment for next generational wealth transfer. For example, the patriarchs of the 80s looked at conventional asset allocation and capital deployment in areas such as real estate, the bricks and mortar, which is always the go-to for deploying capital. That still remains a bedrock. However, next generation family members and also the advisory theme is looking at platforms and areas of capital deployment where women, for example, are leading to find where they can have values deployed, looking at capabilities which are genuinely aligned with the mandate of the family office. I'd call it a new family office shift, which is now gaining momentum in this new era of family office configuration. Women leaders who are often at the forefront, I find, are redefining the traditional mandate of how it's aligned. We're looking at tying performance and looking at new expectations and new frontiers of stewardship, looking at sustainability in real terms, at sort of long-term resilience, rather than sort of a short-term gain and short-term expectations. So what we're seeing is a shifting landscape of this new family office dimension. So that is a key area, I think a key theme which will gain traction over the coming decade. And the coming decade, I think, will witness, as we are seeing geopolitically, a big shift in terms of demands, governance structures, which may diminish and will sort of disappear, evolving into a new landscape, a new family office structure, which now demands good governance, best practice, a gold standard of sort of alignments with new mandates which are sort of coming to the fore. So I think the key area that we could look at really is to redefine what leadership really means around core values, family values, and not only sort of the AUM, assets under management, which is sort of an underlying issue. I think also if we look at the way that modern family offices and their roles should be framed around key areas which are intertwined with roles and responsibilities, looking at not only at sort of capital growth, but also around legacy protection. How are family offices going to be able to sustain wealth management for the next generation? And there's a saying in Arabic that my father rode a camel, I drive a Mercedes, but my children will go back to riding camels. So looking at wealth sustainability, it really is a key area of concern at the moment, and wealth preservation is hugely gaining momentum of importance. For example, if we look at patriarchs of 3 or 4 decades ago, those assets are now being sold for liquidity. So the generational wealth is really shifting, and there needs to be new areas of assets allocation, capital deployment that will preserve the wealth for the family and the next generation. I think this long-term resilience sort of paradigm is of great importance. Being able to have a coterie of advisory councils and trust legacies, for example, offshore trust management, is gaining traction also. So I think, capital growth, legacy protection, and societal impact also is of growing importance. How is wealth across generations and family offices preserving societal impact? What kind of legacy are we leaving for the next generation? How is impact investment going to navigate in this current era of looking at maintaining wealth, growing capital, but having a huge impact on society? Looking also at, I think, impact investment, green capital, green finance is growing as a key vertical in family offices. And so I think if we blend proven capabilities with evolving family values, that would be a very good step in the right direction. One of the most effective, I think, next generation aligned leadership is looking at track records in institutional investing, looking at risk management in operations, also fluency in topics where areas which are gaining sort of an area of investment is climate risk, looking at how governance can be inclusive, looking at stakeholder capitalism, for example. Women that lead family offices have a different type of investment appetite. I think there's more frequent risk assessments, there's more structured use of technology, there's also a big appetite for the frontiers of AI, for example, and looking at cybersecurity to sort of make more robust the types of technology that would preserve generational wealth. So I think these capabilities are framing a new area of concern and investments and landscape for governance and risk appetites to import these considerations into family offices. Okay, I think, for example, if I look at a lived experience, few years ago, I worked for a very, very high-profile royal family office from Saudi Arabia, direct family members to the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, and there was a huge shift in terms of the patriarch, who is now in his 80s, and he handed down the governance and the asset allocation to his daughter and not to his sons, of which there were numerous, because the daughter was really intrinsically involved in the board governance. She sat on the boards. She was working with me hand in glove to look at practical frameworks, looking at impact investments and operational excellence. And her father, seeing this in her, made her the heir apparent for this family office. This was not in any way seen as demeaning by her siblings, her male siblings. This was welcomed by the matriarch. This was welcomed by the leading private bankers, the advisors, the legal advisors, etc. So it seemed to, in terms of a structured council, it seemed to mesh well with the family office structure. So I was brought on board to help provide operational excellence, to help provide an experienced eye and a lens in which to help advise this the princess, and to help give a sort of almost a stress test of new approaches to her investment appetites across the family office and also the different geographies and jurisdictions where we operated. So that was a real life example of how the change of women at the helm of family offices is really gaining momentum. So I think for her, a real test was looking at her leadership paradigm and whether the family could operationalize the impact and her own ESG ambitions without sacrificing Saudi Arabian norms, disciplines, family structures, and also the traditional approaches to the family office. It worked really, really well. So I think that in this domain and in other family offices where women are sort of leaders, these family offices can become more sort of rigorously led, as long as we have excellence in terms of good governance, best practice, and that these risk frameworks are truly aligned with the areas of impact investment, for example, where there is a powerful foundation for driving investments. So this translates, I would say, into clear, coherent frameworks for operational excellence that would namely bind purpose to family office due process. So I think we can structure today's family offices into complementary frameworks whereby we have a certain mandate where at the sort of forefront, I would say, is legacy. Where is the legacy being driven? How do we import from a family traditional legacy going on to the new frontier of running a new sort of investment that protects and extends the founding family story? So looking at core operating businesses where perhaps, for example, ESG or AI is aligned with the risk appetite, looking at strategic holdings and how that aligns with the traditional investments of real estate. I think also a key area for this lens too, I would call it, would be liquidity and growth, where we're looking at where diversified portfolios are aimed at risk-adjusted returns, where certain verticals, AI or ESG or impact investing, are integrated as a risk and opportunity filter. So how is this being processed in real terms, in terms of how we are generating the relevant returns on investments? And I think the third lens would be the long-term impact on these investments. If we look at traditional thematic allocations, looking at, for example, traditionally climate, health, longevity is now a huge area of focus, well-being, education, and also gender equity, where financial returns have a measurable impact and are sort of explicitly pursued together. So how is the long-term impact going to shape the investment appetite in family offices led by women? That is a key area, and I think is a key test for where the navigational compass is going to pan out in the next few years, I say a decade from now. And if we look at, I think, essentially sort of boots on the ground approach in terms of the operating model, I think validating this will be purpose, having sort of a shared missive that is shared by the family of, why the family office exists, its main purpose, its key verticals, and how this will define success across generations is of incredible importance. I think looking also at when I work with family offices, I like to look at crafting new areas of policy making. So codified investments, what are those core investment beliefs? What has it been traditionally with the family office structure? Looking at exclusions and areas of inclusion, looking at impact measuring, how does that look like? What is the gold standard? How are we measuring impact? What do we see as success is so important. Do these align with the family values? Do these align with our investment frameworks? And how do we codify them? And I think also a huge area of focus is people. How do the people that are on our teams, in terms of diversity, multidisciplinary teams that combine investments, the legal areas and the people that bring legalities to the forefront, legal advisors, the gatekeepers, if you will, how do they measure our standards in terms of the operational excellence and driving the driving force behind the family office? I mean, I've worked in family office. We had a very, very small team at sort of the C-suite, very few advisors, worked with excellent trusted advisors offshore, for example. We've worked with fantastic private bankers, legal advisors, who really were the bedrock of driving the operational excellence and the good governance structure to help shape, transform and sustain the family office, which has been so important. And it really helps principals, in this case, female principals, in decision-making roles. And then looking at the processes, how investment and risk processes sort of add value, where impact investments, ESG, are assessed alongside financial metrics at each and every stage. How do we source them? What does the due diligence look like? And how do we sort of approve these and how do we monitor them as of key importance? So if we look at intergenerational wealth transfer and how we create pathways for rising female talent, what does this look like in today's day? And what does it look like going forwards? I think because women are still inevitably at this stage in 2026, a minority in female talent, let's be honest, I think that we need to deliberate talent strategies, look at mentoring, look at how we can have more women on boards. I know the UAE, for example, has been excellent in fostering, promoting and mentoring women on boards and making it a legal requirement in listed companies to ensure that there is female representation on boards across the Emirates. And I've been delighted to be, I've worked in the Prime Minister's office in Dubai, working on navigating and procuring and making new policies which have seen the light of day and have become a sort of a policy across the seven Emirates. So it's been an amazing policy to work on, and it's been completely shifted the landscape in terms of how it is now a legal requirement to have women on boards and to have women representing listed companies across the Emirates. So I think that we need to have sort of a concerted effort in having women on boards or in sort of defined roles as CIOs or deputy CEO positions to help build robust succession pipelines and to help sort of mentor young women to be at the helm on a merit sort of basis. I think tying these such pathways to the family's evolving sort of pathways and values sends a signal that we are who we are, and we are looking to make women more sort of central in the family office of today, across family offices in Europe, UK, and across the world really. There's growing momentum for having women as leaders because they bring so much to the table. And I think that, looking at first generational founders of family offices and succession planning is now changing rapidly in second and third generational women who are leading and professionalizing the family office and having it sort of match and align with their own values without losing that traditional family office DNA or family office values. So I think the great wealth transfer is, exposing where governance is either misaligned or needs to align going forwards to match with new values in family office structures. Women that are stepping into leadership are often the ones who are pushing for and pursuing new frameworks and new frontiers, bringing their own values, own lived experience, their own professional capacities to enable this intrinsic and important transformation. I think women traditionally lead on formalising family councils. I've sort of seen in my own lived experience where women have said, no, let's look at this differently. Let's sort of align and have a new coterie of advisory councils. Let's put in new metrics and new ways of measuring due diligence for looking at new investments, for example, and how to articulate these shared purposes and values and clarifying these decisions between family members and executives and a new way of operating the business. Because we have many family businesses that have become family offices because they need to manage new and growing wealth. And that's happened a lot in the Middle East. So I think governance will be leading the way forward to anchor governance in a shared narrative amongst family offices. Looking at family constitutions, new charters, new value statements is so important. And they need to reflect the family values. I think wealth exists for families that have spent decades generating the wealth, managing wealth and sustaining it. But the new frontier is going to be how we sustain the wealth going forwards and how we plan handsomely, and looking at succession planning is going to be a key element of sustaining that wealth. I think in my experience looking at family offices, there's been excellent structured conversations amongst family members and family assemblies really on how we align on governance and how we structure new narratives and translate these into workable, measurable metrics that document how the younger family generations will recognise the wealth as their own. Because inevitably, this new wealth is their own wealth, and it's being able to clarify their roles going forward and looking at how effectively women-led family offices can distinguish clearly between their own families, the assembly, the governance, the forums, the boards, the composition of the boards, and how this voices and the legacy will be heard on the global stage, and how they can professionalise their family offices as the next generation of female leaders, and how they have the authority nowadays to execute. So I think in closing my keynote, I think that we need to look at women as custodians of both capital formation and the substance of capital allocation and succession planning going forwards. This great wealth transfer is not just a change, it is in terms of who owns the assets going forward. It's a new shift in how families define success and how they enable new risk appetites and the roles and responsibilities going forward. I think today, in my experience, women who have led family offices and who lead them today sit at the intersection of new changes as principals, the C-suite, board memberships, and how they hold together new legacies, trying to embed family cohesion and more looking at sort of having a more demanding role and having more demanding prosperity in terms of how they can maintain the wealth and how they can find new areas of sustaining that wealth going forwards. So I think that, I'm delighted to have given the keynote today, and it's been a very successful forum, a fantastic array of speakers. And I think that we need to, remember that, converting these insights in the family office landscape is incredibly important, but it's how we illustrate and translate these impactful sessions going forwards. Thank you very much.